The May 23rd meeting of the Albemarle County School Board is called to order. We will now stand and have the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our chair, Jono Alcaro, is not here tonight because of the death of his brother. So during the moment of silence, please keep that in mind. We will now have our moment of silence. All right, thank you. Mic check, beginning with Ross. Mr. Holden.
Ross Holden, School Board Attorney.
Bernard Hairston, Assistant Superintendent.
Rosalind Schmidt, Chief Operating Officer.
Steve Colazar, Scottsville District.
Kate Acuff, Jack Jewett District.
Graham Page, Samuel Miller District.
David Oberg, Whitehall District.
Katrina Carlson, Rio District.
Matt Hawes, Superintendent.
Debbie Collins, Deputy Superintendent.
Claire Kaiser, Assistant Superintendent.
I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
It has been moved and second that we approve the agenda. Any discussion? If not, those in favor, let it be known by the usual sign.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried. Approval of consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Colazar, second by Mr. Oberg, that we approve the consent agenda. Discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda is passed. We are now ready for announcements.
I'm going to take the first announcement tonight. It is my very distinct pleasure to recognize 56 people, some sitting before us tonight and others who were not able to make it tonight, who are our retirees from this school year. The people whose names I'm going to call have retired somewhere between August of 2019 and now, and we just had a little recognition and reception for them, and on behalf of all of us, the work that you all have done, no matter what the role is and what your job has been and how long you've been with us, truly from the bottom of our hearts, our school division is a much better place because of each one of you, and our children are in a much better place because of each one of you, and I thank you all. I am going to read off the names of everybody on the list. What I'd like to do is, when your name is called, if you could just stand, and once we get a good group standing, I will pause, and we'd like you to come up and be recognized and shake the board members' hands, and then we'll continue on beyond that. And I know that at each of your schools and departments, as we wrap up the end of the year, you'll probably have some additional recognitions there. Again, thank you, each and every one of you. We really appreciate the work that you have done in Albemarle County Public Schools. So as I say your name, please stand. Catherine Baylor, principal at Jack Jewett. Brooke Asher, teacher at Kale. I'm sorry. I'm going to read the years of service. So now I'm going to round them up from the numbers that are on your name tags. So okay, Brooke Asher, 28 years of service. Catherine was also 28 years of service. Andy Blanton has been with us 3 years. Robin Bowling, principal of Greer, was with us for 6 years. Reimer Broderson from Western Albemarle High School, 19 years. Thomas Boulia, remember to stand please as I call your name. Tom Boulia from Albemarle High School, 27 years. Beth Cherms, our licensure specialist in human resources, 16 years. Diane Clark, from Monticello High School, 33 years. Thank you. Kevin Dodrell from a lead client support specialist, 19 years. Pamela Dean from Stone Robinson, a kindergarten teacher there, 40 years. Janice Iden, third grade teacher at Baker Butler, 30 years. Deborah Gibson, a custodian at Brownsville, 14 years. Karen Goodlow, media specialist at Greer Elementary School, 32 years. Diane Goodrich, library media specialist at Stone Robinson, 38 years. Albert Graves, a bus driver out at Brownsville, 15 years. John Gray, our assistant director of human resources, 17 years. Hal Hankins, social studies teacher at Albemarle High School, 22 years. Eleni Heshin, physical education teacher at Baker Butler, 26 years. Bobby Hughes, assistant principal at Western Albemarle, 32 years. Sandy Kaiser, classroom teacher at Western Albemarle, 30 years. I'm going to have that group that I've just called come on up and be recognized, and then I'll continue the list.
Congratulations. Thank you so much.
I'm done following directions. Thank you, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Our list is in quasi-alphabetical order, so if you thought your name should have been called, don't worry, it's coming up. I will read a few more names. Jane McMichael, CTE teacher at Albemarle High School, 31 years. Scovie Martin, fine arts and social studies at Western Albemarle, 37 years. Debbie Maupin, a transportation service manager, 15 years. Candy Mitchell, a teaching assistant at Agner Hurt, 16 years. Judy Million, a kindergarten teacher at Woodbrook, 29 years. I'm sorry, 29 years. Sorry about that. John Payne, a lead bus driver at Henley and Western, 7 years. Linda Peace, a math teacher at Sutherland, 14 years. Bridget Pritchett, an OA5 in the bus shop, 32 years. Jane Pritchett, office associate at Sutherland, 31 years. Donna Rehorn, a music teacher at Baker Butler, 27 years. Beth Skorbanski, lead desk engineer, 12 years. Ed Spellman, a teacher at Baker Butler, 13 years. Wynn Taylor, a math teacher at Sutherland, 30 years. Greg Thomas, music teacher at Albemarle High School, 34 years. Ruth Trice, world language teacher at Albemarle High School, 35 years. Bob Vanderveer, lead custodian at Broadus Wood, 4 years. I'm going to keep going. Maria Wayne, a teaching assistant at Greer, 15 years. Lori Weekly, instructional support at Stone Robinson, 19 years. Lance Wisen, classroom teacher at Albemarle High School, 36 years. Jennifer Whiteneck, gifted resource teacher at Baker Butler, 27 years. Keisha Goodman, a pre-K teacher at Stone Robinson, 33 years. Ruth Kavanaugh, gifted resource teacher at Greer, 10 years. I'll stop there, and we'll let those people come up, and then we'll continue.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I have a few more people to recognize. Nancy Mellick, art teacher at Western, 34 years. Debbie Kaysen, office associate and bookkeeper at Red Hill, 32 years. Sandra Billies, first grade and kindergarten teacher at Scottsville, 14 years. David Crouch, school counselor at Brownsville, 22 years. Janet Key, transportation assistant out at Crozet, 8 years. Lynn Liardi, classroom teacher at Jewett, 17 years. Lucille Leo Visario, food service associate with child nutrition at Jewett, 13 years. Thomas Lewis, EDEP teacher at Cale, 13 years. John Ross, custodian with building services at Cale, 20 years. Hirogo Shireman, Japanese language teacher at Albemarle High School, 12 years. Thomas Scott, lead bus driver in transportation, 16 years. Deborah Riddick, teaching assistant at Cale, 25 years. Beth Kuhn, special education teacher at Henley, 16 years. And Blair Jones, music teacher out at Brownsville, 19 years. If that group could come, anybody from that group, please come on up.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. I'll miss seeing you. Yep. All right, good. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Thomas.
Again, I would like to thank each of you who we recognize for your retirement. We wish you the very best. As you heard, you're always welcome to come back and substitute with us in any capacity. We really appreciate that, and you'll be hearing from us. Anything from the board members before I say anything?
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, maybe I do have one other thing to say. I'm not too sure about how to sort of say this, but somebody to my right said that the teachers who've been teaching 33 years, have been teaching as long as our youngest school board member has been alive. So that sort of got to me, and I'm not really sure how to sort of say that. I'm not saying it in a nasty way, but it was sort of an interesting fact.
Yeah, you know, I
It was
thought of
sort
it
of
too,
point.
because I'm thinking teachers like you are who guided people like me. I mean, the impact that you have, and I'm sure there are people all throughout the community that have been affected by you and think of you as someone who has gotten to them to where they are. So thank you. I did think of it. I mean,
Right,
Thank
so
you
now
so
we know
much.
who our youngest school board member is.
You know, it's the epitome of the concept, it takes a village.
Right, that's
It
true.
takes a
That's true.
community, and
Right.
that's one of the things that I've most enjoyed about Albemarle County Schools is that we really are a community, a group that works together for the betterment of kids.
Right. Okay. So other announcements?
Okay, so with our retiree visitors, you are welcome to stay and join us for the school board meeting, but we also understand if you're going on.
What, you're leaving?
Right. Wow.
That's what retirement means.
I know.
I do have one more person that I would like to introduce to the board tonight, and this is the time of the year where we start doing our principal announcements for next year, and I am pleased tonight to introduce Ashby Johnson as the next year principal at Jack Jewett Middle School. Ashby, come on up.
Congratulations, Ashby.
You can tell your mother.
I did have a couple of announcements. So one is that our Monticello High School theater teacher, Madeline Michael, is just won national recognition. from the Tony Awards. She's won the Tony's 2019 Excellence in Theater Education Award, and that's a national. That means, in essence, she's, according to Tony, the best high school theater teacher in America. So it's quite an accomplishment, and she will actually be at the Tonys to receive her award, just like all the other Tony Award winners. So we're super excited about Marilyn. And on another note, Chris Bunin, who many of us know, is a social studies teacher at Albemarle High School, but he's famous for teaching his global information systems class that many students want to get into and learn more about geography, but also there's a way of framing historical narratives and doing a lot of social studies through that work. Chris was named today as for the Charlottesville Business Innovation Council, or CBIC, announced him as one of their award winners for this year. So Chris has been garnering awards for quite some time now, and this is another one added to his mantle, and both of these educators really represent the best in the work that we do in the county. Any other announcements?
And the school board?
Bernard, it looks like Bernard had one.
Okay.
Sure. I'd like to invite each of you to the 4th Annual Diversity Conference, including our board members. I hope you'll be there. It's going to be held June 1st at Jack Jewett Middle School. We will have an opportunity to celebrate staff members who have experienced our culturally responsive teaching certification process, as well those who have experienced our micro-credentialing process. This year we had 26 candidates to be considered for certification, of which 23 met the rigorous criteria. So we're up to 40 total over the 4-year period, which is a significant accomplishment. Those 23 will be the headliners at the conference, meaning they will be sharing their journey or transformation into becoming a culturally responsive educator. So I hope that board members will use that link that I sent you last week and sign up. And those in the audience, you have about 2 more days to get it done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hairston. Any other school board or school board members with business?
Oh, I met with Pam Riley, who's the Planning Commission member from the Scottsville District, and she was concerned that they've been approving so many housing units in the Scottsville 5th Street area. She was concerned about the impact it was going to have on Kale, which is already at capacity. Just wanted to share that.
So I had just wanted to read some things from my check-in for tomorrow. The quote that I had put on there for all of our employees tomorrow, I think it's appropriate for tonight as well, is often when you think you're at the end of something, you're at the beginning of something else, and that's from Fred Rogers. All of us out there in the schools, maybe, and I see many school staff here tonight, when you get back to the school tomorrow, please show your appreciation to your school testing coordinator. They are now in the process of administering thousands of standards of learning tests across the county. And if you have a moment to send India Hahn an email, she's our division testing director. That's quite a job, a lot of responsibility, as far as helping to make sure that our students are treated fairly and that they have a testing experience that's positive as possible. They really do a lot of work around that, so please give them your appreciation. Next Thursday and Friday, we start our school graduations at Murray High School on Thursday evening, and then of course Friday evening at Western Albemarle High School. That one, is outside, so hope the weather holds up. It's really quite an event. Of course, we had the K-Tech completer ceremony last night. It was quite a nice event. 2 excellent student speakers telling stories that were very inspiring. I can't say enough about the quality of the programs and the graduates that we offer for our K-Tech students, and I'm really proud of these students. Speaking of completers, we just had a change to the way that we celebrate our retirees. Over the many years past, we've had a ceremony that was just for retirees and their supervisors at K-Tech, and the AEA would help us host it. And this year we did a shift and moved it here to the central office prior to a school board meeting. I like that principals came to it, other supervisors attended, a lot of colleagues came to it, and also that the staff had a chance to have a nice handshake with their ultimate supervisors, the school boards. I think that was really special, and I really appreciate the remarks from Graham. That was quite a good job on that one. Today, Debbie and several of us participated with school and building services staff, as well as designers from New Vista Design and Quinn Evans Architects, to begin making plans for the process, not the plans, but the process, to envision and create the instructional program for High School Center Number 2. As you may recall, locating and building a 400 student per day capacity learning center is part of our solution for overcrowding at Albemarle High School, as well as ongoing advancement of an ACPS contemporary high school program. One aspect of planning a process was to be sure that we engage staff, students, and families at the ground floor of ideas for the center. Some plans, as you can imagine, will need to be made centrally after receiving input so that we can address the capacity concerns at both AHS and WAHS. As much as feasible, we will seek input on decisions about the center and the prospective physical plant developments and improvements at our schools. Based on the responses of our ACPS educators that we have had thus far to the changes we are considering in the high school program to empower student choice and tackle the stress dilemma, I'm encouraged that your progressive, or our employees' progressive vision for what schools could be is aligning with our board's and mine as well. And the last note I have is that back in February, I had finished a really great novel written by Tommy Orange. It's called There. And I pushed out to all of our employees, and I asked for a group to form to do a book study, to read that book and to do a study. I asked for a teacher, school administrator, support staff member, a parent, a high school junior or senior, and an instructional coach to get together to read the book. And so I asked them to read the book and spend the early spring having book club meetings about it, and they had a few meetings. And then we had our final debrief meeting on a Saturday morning at Michael's Diner up on Route 29. I really enjoyed the discussion about this book. It's a powerful narrative about Native Americans who are going to coalesce around the city of Oakland, and it kind of talks about their journey on their way there and what the ultimate outcome of that meeting is. And so it was a great time to do a book study, and I'm hoping that we can do another one next year. So that's my business, and Claire has some as well.
I have a few items to share with you. One of the things that I wanted to share is on tonight's consent agenda is a policy that we'd like you to review. It's policy GCC, the LEAVE program, and you may be sitting there thinking, wait a minute, we just did that. So I'd like to just take a few moments and explain why that is back on there and what we're asking from the board. So obviously this policy has been recently reviewed and adopted and approved by the school board, becoming effective July 1st. As you are aware, we are moving toward implementation of Kronos, a time and attendance system that will allow for more accuracy in pay for our non-exempt employees for the work that they are doing. And the system will also help us better manage time and attendance for all employees. The rollout of Kronos is scheduled for mid-July. While we know that considerable time, effort, and thought went into the adopted policy, as we have gotten closer to the implementation of the Kronos system, feedback, particularly from our principals, has caused us to think about considering leave in a different manner for our teachers. As employees exempt from FLSA regulations, we are able to look at how we administer leave differently for that group of employees. We want to make sure that the policy we adopt recognizes and allows for the individual needs of our teachers, creates a culture of leave and attendance that is positive and proactive, and sets clear expectations around acceptable use, as we know student performance is clearly tied to having a high-quality teacher who is present in their classroom. We also know that teacher attendance is tied to a need for substitutes. As we have shared through various school board meetings throughout this year, when teachers request substitutes in advance, we are better able to fill those positions. Policy GCC as the adoption, the July 1st adoption is written, may actually encourage teachers to request leave at the last minute, making it far more difficult to hire a substitute for their absence. We would like additional time to explore and research best leave practices for teachers prior to implementation. And as such, we respectfully request that the board approve a leave policy that is before you for first read tonight. This version of policy GCC allows for the recently adopted policy to be implemented for all employees except for teachers and reverts back to the current practices in the language related to teachers. Through approval of this interim policy, we will be able to do the necessary research, get feedback, and present what we intend to be the final version of the policy for board approval in the fall of 2019. So I just wanted to put that out, give you some information in case you're wondering why it is out there. So it really is almost a hybrid policy in the version that you're seeing now. And we're looking at that as just for this brief moment in time that allows us to look at other methods and practices around leave for teachers.
Are there any questions for Dr. Kaiser?
Right. Thank you. The other thing I wanted to do tonight is just give you a brief hiring update for teachers for the upcoming school year. And the thing that I would caution you with these numbers is this is just today's moment in time. I anticipate, based on our current trends, that we still have about 60 to 70 teachers to hire. So I know that the numbers that I share with you tonight and the percentages will change as we get closer to the start of the school year. As of about 8 o'clock this morning, we've hired 92 teachers, 33 at the elementary level, 54 at the secondary level, and 5 instructional support. They include the school psychologist, speech language pathologist, and a learning technology integrator. As you are very well aware, we are really focusing on minority recruitment and hiring this year. At this point, 17.39% of our hires identify themselves as minority. And we also have 15 novices that we are bringing on board with us. And about 8 of those novices, 53% of all novices, that's not right. Yeah, that's right, numbers-wise. 53% of all novices fall into or identify themselves as minority teachers. So we're really excited to have these folks joining us at the start of their careers. As I said, we anticipate hiring about 60 to 70 additional teachers. One of the things that we also talked about earlier in the year was the number of applicants we have. And as I've shared, we use our screening interview pool as an indicator of how many individual applicants we have for this school division, although they may apply for multiple positions. At this point, we have 851 teachers who have applied for screening interviews. We've completed about 550 screening interviews at this time. And the thing that is really promising for us in our outlook is last year, our total number of screening interviews from start to end of the hiring season was 745. So we've already far exceeded that, and we still have a good couple of months to go in the hiring process. At this point, the only positions that we've really kind of identified as harder to fill, and we're calling them harder to fill because they have smaller applicant pools, are functional skills, special education, and German. And I also know that that list will change as we go farther in and hire more candidates in some of the core content areas that are often harder to fill. But right now, we do have a number of applicants in those positions. So we feel good about where we are. We are continuing our efforts around minority recruitment and hiring. And I will say the folks that I've had the opportunity to talk to, at least through the screening process that we've hired, are very, very impressive. So I'm excited about what lies ahead for our students.
Comments, questions on hiring?
Just one, Claire. So we're looking at about a total of 150.
About 150 to 160 is what our trends have shown over the last couple of years.
Well, I think last year we were more like 180.
We were much higher last year because, if you recall, we added the juvenile detention center with us, and that increased our number of hires,
right.
and so that I think that bumped us up a little bit more than average. So, but right now we're anticipating right around what the trends were prior to that. Our teachers receive contracts this week, and so that tends to be our next wave of potential postings. And so we will see where we land after that.
Thank you.
Okay, is that it, Dr. Kaiser?
I think I'm done talking.
Okay. And Dr. Haas, is that your business
I
too.
think that there's something from Patrick. He wants me to pass around this agenda for him. Thank you, Dr. McLaughlin.
Thanks, Dr. Haas. Always appreciate your
My
help.
pleasure.
So good evening, board members. Pat McLaughlin, Chief of Strategic Planning. And I just wanted to take a minute tonight to give you a quick preview of the draft agenda that we've been putting together for our board retreat. Our annual retreat will take place 2 weeks from tomorrow. We'll be at Center 1 beginning at 12:30. And we'll have lunch available at 12:30. We'll start off at 1 o'clock with the annual board self-evaluation. We've booked about half an hour worth of time for that. And then we'll do a quick connector with John McQuilkin from Human Resources and jump right into our work, continuing our work that we started in the April work session around our strategic priorities. And we've got 2 more strategic priorities to workshop and turn into SMART priorities. Following that, we're going to hear a report on our self-sustaining programs and have some discussion around that. Those are EDEP and child nutrition. Anything else in there, Rosalind? I think just those 2. Followed by an equity report from Dr. Hairston and his team. And then we've blocked an hour at the end of the retreat for an open discussion for any items that the board members want to bring. So I would encourage you all to be thinking about any topics that you want to have for open discussion there. And if you've got any feedback on the agenda in its current state, you can either give that to me tonight or pass that along to Mr. Page or Mr. Alcaro for when we finalize things in our next pre-agenda. Any questions?
I just would like to repeat that I feel like our priorities should not be SMART goals. Our priorities are our vision of where we want to focus to make sure the division is headed in the right direction. And under those focus points, it's appropriate to have strategies and SMART goals to accomplish those priorities or to advance that vision. But I think the priorities themselves need to be more vision than a specific goal. And that's something we'll have time to talk about some at the retreat.
Any other comments? Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along, we are now ready for our work session.
I'm going to start the work session, if that's okay.
Perfect.
We have 3 items for the school board work session this evening. This is a little different agenda, a different way of doing a work session than we have been lately. These will be more presentations with opportunities for questions. So just wanted to let you know that up front. The first 2 items are updates about the SEED initiative and the freshman seminar. The third item is information regarding school accreditation procedures. To set the stage for our first 2 updates, I'd like to put them in context of ongoing work. The updates on the SEED initiative and freshman seminar are associated with our strategic work regarding the social and emotional well-being of our students. Nick, do you mind advancing to the next slide? These 2 areas are among several layers we've added over the past 5 years. Since the loss of the Safe Schools Healthy Students grants, we have sought to replace and add services for students. You can see at a glance the number of additions we have added. These have mainly been in the areas of professional development for our staff and in increasing direct services to our students. You will hear about the SEED work, a 20-month endeavor, first, and then freshman seminar finishing its first year of implementation. After each update, we will pause for questions. Our first group will start with Dr. Nick Smith. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share what the SEED team and myself have done over the last 20 months. Let's see if I can get this to work for me. As you'll remember, the rationale for the starting the Equity and Access Initiative was that we had a large growth in student population over the 10 years between 2006 through 2017, over 1,000 students, or 8.2% students. In that group of students, we found that there was quite a difference of the students that we're getting. There were a good number of economically disadvantaged students, 67%, over 67% of the students. We had a good number of students who are English language learners. That was up by over 37%. And in addition to that, many of the special education students that we had coming in, we had quite a number more coming in, but the severity of their needs had increased dramatically. So the idea was to figure out how to do this differently. So in the budget initiative for 2017 and 18, we were looking at how to support school and educators with credentialing, and one way was through the SEED team. The other way is through micro-credentialing. So the purpose of the SEED team is basically to develop evidence-based approaches to address the kids' needs socially, emotionally, and academically, and to help support the staff, the teachers and other staff, to understand what those social and emotional needs are, with the intention of improving academic success. Okay, the SEED team is being developed as a prototype so that we could go through and do the develop processes and start the PD. And then once we have that refined some, hopefully be able to expand that out into all the different schools in the county. So instead of just staying at elementary, hopefully eventually getting to middle schools and high schools. But I spoke a little bit earlier to somebody who we talked about the fact that I think at elementary is a good age to start because we can have more effectiveness at that place, at that point in time. The SEED team is actually placed in 4 schools within what we've called the urban ring: Agner Hurd Elementary, Cale Elementary, Greer Elementary, and Woodbrook Elementary. The placement there was intentional in that there are a larger proportion of students with needs, and so that gave us a more concentrated group to be able to start working and developing the procedures, process, understandings, and so on. Major areas of focus for the SEED team have been culturally responsive teaching, trauma-sensitive practices, family support practices, as well as behavior supports for the students in the school. In the first year, last year, we started off, trying to pull the project together and so on. And to do that, the team embedded themselves within the 4 schools that we were serving. During that time, we created and presented many professional development experiences in the 4 areas that we identified. During that time, we also assisted in vetting a lot of courses that would be online courses to support the micro-credentialing initiative. And we did a tremendous amount of outreach to the target communities, as well as we collaborated with both our community service providers as well as many private service providers. And finally, we created a rubric to guide our efforts. And that rubric we distilled down and made a sheet which administrators can use to go around the school and sort of self-assess. Where are we in the grand scheme of things? Where am I in terms of the need for staff development? Where are we in terms of our mindset, and so on? So now I'm moving right along, as you can tell. We're in our second year, and feel like we've got our feet under ourselves a little bit more. And during this year, the decision was made to increase our focus on building staff capacity. So we started last year with lots of large venue trainings. And this year, although we've continued those, we're also doing smaller group trainings and working with individuals along the way, with the idea that as we are entering this work, we're helping to help people not just gain the knowledge, but reflect on their practices, what they've learned, and how that fits into their schools. In addition, we've assisted schools with writing protocols to address some challenges that we have. One of the big ones that I will look at a little bit later in this presentation is attendance. So looking at what we do, why we are doing it that way, how we go about doing that. We collaborated with service providers and have planned events and have worked on building a network for the children and families so that at this point we can reach out and touch base with, for example, Department of Social Services, Region 10, to community groups like Sin Barreras and Creciendo Juntos and the Women's Initiative and so on, really trying to find where there are resources so that as we see the need, we can either do referrals or work with them on ways to address some of the issues. For example, one of the things I've did a presentation for Sin Barreras for Hispanic Symposium to area professionals. And this coming weekend, I'll be doing a similar presentation in Spanish to the Spanish community. So trying to outreach to everybody and really welcome them in and empower them to do things. Then finally, one of the things that we're looking at is how do we align the efforts of all the different departments. Dr. Hairston's department and ours, I think we are doing some very similar things. I've worked with some of his staff. They work with me. I've worked with the ESOL department, and we've looked at processes like helping the office assistants learn how to use InterpreTalk for when folks come in who don't, where English isn't their primary language. They developed these cards that say, I speak Swahili, for example, and they know how to use that. So we're trying to build in processes for all the staff in the school to meet their needs. And one way we're doing it is through the FEED team. The FEED team is family engagement and encouragement. And I forget what D is, to be honest with you. But they were obviously playing off of what our name was. And so we are looking at how we're doing all family engagement and trying to very much align our efforts. So spending our time this year, areas where we focus are building staff capacity, as I mentioned, attendance, family engagement, community partnerships, and behavior, looking at behavior. So this whole process is very much plan, do, study, act. So we're constantly looking at what we're doing, trying to improve it, and trying it again, keep going, trying to refine what we're doing. So building staff capacity, we spent about 46% of our time doing that because we spent a lot of time in the schools, talking with teachers, working on teams, trying to build plans, just helping people look at their practices and think about how they might do it differently. What is their thought process and so on. And we, like I said previously, we've done it large group, small groups, and individuals. We've collaborated, as we said. We've worked with the school teams. We've worked with the principals and assistant principals, as you hear. We've also done a lot of modeling within the school where we've intervened with kids and demonstrated how we talked to them, and afterwards talked about why did I go about it this way? What was it I said, and what was the purpose of that? And then we've gathered information with all our partnerships with community agencies and trying to pool all those resources so that we can meet people's needs. This is an example of one of the things that we've done. I spoke about the attendance of protocol, and this is a flow chart. I know that it's, I shouldn't say this, but I have challenges with seeing, and some of this stuff's pretty small, but it speaks to starting off by building a relationship, making regular contact with parents, and going through calling parents after a certain amount of time, and trying to figure out what are the issues that are getting in the way of regular attendance. And the idea is that we're trying to connect with the parents, collaborate with them, not say, you are doing it wrong. That we understand that many people have a lot of challenges. And so we want to figure out how we work together, how we partner to help their kids. If we have difficulty with that, then we'll set up a meeting and pull people in and make a plan. And if that plan doesn't work, we'll make another plan. And if that doesn't work, we'll make another plan. But if eventually we get to where we feel like we need to move on, you see, we'll go and get court involvement, and part of that is not to be punitive, but rather to look at how we can get services. So with attendance, we spent 26% of our time. We were working actually implementing a lot of the attendance things. We going to meetings, calling parents, helping staff call and make those connections and so on. Again, we worked on making collaborative relationships. We worked on individualizing where the person's needs were. And as I said, we involved the court system only if we were unable to resolve the chronic absenteeism. Family engagement, we spent about 11% of our time. Again, the idea, we've moved from the word involvement. We don't just want parents to come in and say, hey, I came in for a pizza, but rather that they come in and feel like they are part of the school, that they're integral to their child's education and so on. We've focused on helping staff look at effective, regular communication. Part of that is we've used the ESOL area in that they have a protocol on how to write things in plain English. So plain English means very simple wording, and that allows, if a parent does not know how to speak English, to use a translation app on their phone to get much more effective translation. Trying to get out things in the native language and so on. We've collaborated with staff and parents to plan and carry out events. We've, as I said before, we worked with the feed team trying to align the efforts. We have done a lot of linking families to services. I personally probably have people call me at least 8 times a week saying, I don't know how to do this. And I don't hand carry them, but I help them connect with people who can help them get things done, or I help them resolve things, think through how they may go about stuff. the final thing on this page was creating a welcoming milieu. I worked with Ashby Kindler, and we went and looked at all the schools. What does it look like outside? How welcoming does it appear? How do staff welcome them? What are, as I referred to earlier, what are the OA's response to people who aren't exactly like them? How do they respond to that and get translation or whatever it might be? Community partnerships, we did about 8% of the time. Again, we are looking at mutual challenges. We all know that there's plenty to go around, but that sometimes we can help each other. We can support each other along the way. We've been networking with the private resources, been able to get hook parents up with folks who can provide them with things. And one thing that I've been doing lately is trying to partner with leaders within neighborhoods and with managers of housing developments. I found it effective to talk to them, and they have relationships with their rental patrons, and they talk up events that are going on or services that are around. So trying to get them where they're at. This next slide is an example of what we're starting right now, which is a behavior management protocol. It's looking at how behaviors are dealt with. We divided it amongst minor and major behaviors. Within each area, we've given resources for whoever's using it. Obviously, if they're online, they can click on hyperlinks and find things. One example is under the minor behaviors, we have scripts. One of the things is that oftentimes people react automatically to behaviors, and we're trying to help teachers and staff respond in ways that are helpful. So one of the things is we have scripts. When a child is refusing to do something or being defiant, what do you say? How do you say it? And how do you do that? And I've actually made little cards that are laminated that a couple of teachers are wearing on chains around their necks, so that when they know they're getting into that situation, they sort of flip through them and look at them and try to respond differently. So we're trying to provide resources and ways for staff to be able to respond consistently to things. And I feel like that speaks to the equity that we're dealing with things. So we're going to give a perspective from the schools.
Thanks, Nick. My name's Doug Granger. I'm the principal at Agner Hurt. And when I think of the SEED team, I think about two kids. One's a kindergartner. He about a month before school started, he lost his little sister and went into foster care. Another one is a second grade boy who spent the last 2 years homeless, most of the time living in a hotel with his 3 siblings and his mom. Because of their background, they had an exceptionally difficult time trusting anybody, let alone near strangers in a big school that they didn't have any context for. In the past, what we would have done is we would have looked at our teachers and looked at our class lists and found a teacher who has a knack for kids in crisis, and honestly a class list with a lot of easygoing kids. We just play Sudoku and try to move them around so they could be in the best possible spot, and we've done that. But the other thing we would do is I'd walk around with a walkie-talkie, and so would my assistant principal, because we need to be on call for when there was what the SEED teams taught us is an amygdala hijack. So we do this little symbol with our hands, and we know the kid's about to have a temper tantrum or run away. So we've always had at Agner Hurt, and I know a lot of schools, 2 or 3 kids like this, and we manage it. We have 6 children like this in our kindergarten class this year alone. So our old way of doing it just doesn't work. It just isn't manageable. So every staff member in our school, through the SEED team, learned how to respond to an amygdala hijack when a kid's that stressed. Every class has a break box. Every class has a safe, quiet spot in the room for when kids feel like they're getting ramped up. They can go take the break, and they have some activities they're trained in how to use to help them calm down and move on with their day. We've also gotten crisis prevention training. So everybody knows what to do when there's a crisis like this, and they also know what not to do. When a kid's behavior is explosive or unsafe, there's great things to do, and there's some things to avoid. I guess what I'm saying is we don't have to play Sudoku with our class list, because every teacher in our school is trained on how to work with kids who are in crisis this year. And it's not just about amygdala hijacks or break boxes. As a school, we've gotten better at engaging all of our kids, all of our families. We're not a poor school. Half of our kids live in poverty, but the other half live in middle, upper middle class neighborhoods. We have kids who were born halfway around the world, but we have a lot of kids who were born right here in Charlottesville. And what that causes sometimes is a feeling of or. I can meet this child's need who is in poverty, or I can engage this child. I can work with this child from Africa who doesn't speak English, or I can work with this child who speaks perfect English, maybe better than I do. And, that goes on and on. What SEEDS helped us do is find more ands in every classroom, not just for teachers who have a knack for working with diversity, not just for teachers who have a knack for working with kids in crisis, but the tyranny of the or, we've moved into more ands. Every teacher in our school has had culturally responsive teaching modules 1, 2, and 3. Every single teacher. Every single teacher in our school has had training on how to engage families one-on-one and as a class. And as a school, we're fortunate we have a lot of trust in our community, but what we've been learning is how to turn that trust, how to turn that trust into academic performance for where kids are learning at higher levels. And we're not there. We're still learning. SEED's only in its second year. And but what I like is that we're not leaving it up to chance or good intentions. That the SEED team being embedded with us, one-on-one, modeling with us, and for teachers and for me and for my assistant principal, day in, day out, this work, whether it's with attendance or an amygdala hijack. And it's research-based, it's great training, and I'm glad we get to do it. As a principal who works in a school every day, it's nice to be in a school where we're all speaking the same language when it comes to family engagement, when it comes to kids in crisis, and when it comes to culturally responsive teaching. We all are on the same page. And that page is filled with really good evidence-based strategies and structures that we're trying to do. I appreciate knowing it's not just up to the knack a person has, but that it really has to do with training and teaching and professional learning. And we're getting better. Mostly I'm thankful for the skillful expertise of the SEED team and how they're right there at our kind of a phone call away. Sometimes it's just down the hall. So just to end with a little story, one of the little boys, the kindergartner I mentioned, he had one of his caregivers coming to visit, and it was in the middle of a amygdala hijack. He was throwing a temper tantrum, and it was pretty loud, and it was pretty disturbing if you're not used to that. And as we're walking down the hallway, and this gentleman is walking next to me, and I can kind of feel him, like, what am I walking into? I was able to say to him with a totally clear conscience, don't worry, we're not making this up as we go along. And I could feel him kind of exhale, and we walked in and we solved that problem. I think we've always had great teachers. We always have great intentions. Matching the great teachers, the great intentions, and the professional learning that's happened has been the magic for Agner Herdit with SEED. So thanks for providing that opportunity, and thank you, Nick, for your team. I think we're going to take questions now.
I think he has one more slide.
One more slide? Okay.
Okay, so now it's what do we do from here? Our goal in the coming years is to continue with the professional development activities. We want to refine what we're doing, the protocols, our way of engaging staff and families. We want to work on fidelity of everything we do. We've always taught people a lot of information, and when they go home, so to speak, it's hard to stick with that because you're functioning on your own. So I think a big part is how do we help people implement the protocols, the knowledge that they know, with fidelity, so that everybody's doing the same thing. That provides a lot of reassurance for kids and their parents when they see everybody on the same page, pulling in the same direction, and having a clear vision of where they want to go. Again, we're trying to create the structures. We want to build the milieu within the school so that it feels like it's my school to whichever parent shows up, whether they're from Uganda, from Scottsville, or from Argentina. You know, we want that to be the place. So, and we want to continue to collaborate with community resources and build a seamless net where we can really help each other and really support the families as best we can. So that's it for me, except for any questions that you all might have.
Remind me, how many seed team members are there?
We started off with 6.
That's what I, okay, that's what I recall.
We're now down to 4. So we have one person in each one of the schools. We use the technology person for a year and a half and found that we'd gotten to a place where we felt comfortable with what we had, and that we have that support from the technology team so that we didn't continue to need them. The other person, we just felt like we could do it with the 4 of us at the moment.
I mean, it also sounds like, well, since the first introduction to this pilot, where my impression was that it was more you going in and problem solving. You have a large percentage of your time, which may still happen, but a large percentage of your time is scaling it so the whole school is on the same page. A lot of professional development.
That is a little bit of a challenge, but I think we're within the schools. We meet as a team once a week and discuss what's going on, what were the challenges we're facing, and the things that we're doing. And we're slowly working on developing that bigger vision, the bigger plan to be able to roll it out into different places.
Okay, well, you're comfortable with the staffing then. I mean, I don't have the 4 schools census memorized, but it's about 2,000 elementary school kids, basically, the 4 elementary schools. So,
you know, everybody always asks for more staffing.
well,
So,
right. I don't.
yeah.
I'm not giving it
I-
away, but
I
I just want you to be able to do the job because I think there's a lot of promising
I
elements.
think
to
if
this.
we get to the place where we feel like we need more, I'm sure I can ask Dr. Collins and we'll move on that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
One of the things I would add that I've noticed over time is that the functionality of the group has evolved. And when they first began and the principals and the group sat in the room together, there was a lot of sharing in a way of, here's what I do. And now, the last meeting, they put on the table a problem of practice that they were experiencing, and they were brainstorming together, and they came up with a solution that none of them had thought about before. And so I think that's the magic and the beauty of this team, is it is started to have the professionals that live in the building every day think together and not separately, and that I think the protocols and the processes that they've evolved are better than they were before as individual schools.
I was just thank you for your presentation. Thank you for the work you're doing. I'm troubled with the equivocation of an amygdala hijacking and a temper tantrum, because my understanding was amygdala hijackings can be positive. They can be people like me who laugh uncontrollably. They can be moments where you have a moment of clarity that you don't logically get there, but you think it's an important spot. So I don't want to get fixated on that.
I think when we're referring to amygdala hijacking is when a student is overwhelmed at
Right.
the moment and they aren't able to think.
Process.
They aren't able to process. And so a part of it is by doing things very consistently and calmly, it enables the kids to settle down more so that they can actually use all their capacity and learn that using those really achieves the goal for them of feeling more in control, independent, and capable. So, again, in terms of looking at amygdala hijacking, we're referring
You're looking at a
mostly
piece of
to
it.
losing
Okay.
their control.
Okay.
Thanks for the question.
At what point do you think you might have some programs that's been developed by SEED to be moved out to the other schools?
Well, I think at this point we are close to the place where I think that other schools could use the attendance protocol at that. I believe that it'll probably take another year or so to be able to get a whole group of things together that we could start rolling out, that other people could use, that other schools could use.
I thought you also talked about doing some professional development that would be open to anybody in the division. Is that right?
I think during
Or is-
the summer, a lot of things that we do are offered to everybody within the system. And at the start of the year, many of the things are also available. And then we focus in for the schools for the school-based sort of PD.
As you're working on this, on your protocols, are you developing a measurement scale or some concept of how you're going to measure student progress? And maybe not, one of the dangers of using school-wide averages, if you're concerned about 30% of the students, say a school like Agner, say you got 200 kids that you're concerned about, and the SEED team is really working with those 200. Have you developed a way that you're going to measure their progress, both on social and emotional learning as well as academics?
That's a hard question for me. As you know, Ms. Colasar, I tend to be a global sort of person, but we are working on trying to get measures of improvement of attendance. It's more sort of qualitative thing, more engagement of parents, more engagement in terms of really being involved as opposed to just showing up for the pizza party. Our hope is to work with the group within ACPS that can help us to figure out how to measure those things, those kids who are identified by the demographics as historically not doing as well as others, and see if there is movement amongst that group. I don't know if that was an adequate answer, but
I just think it's always important to measure, and you're working with a specific group or subgroup of students, and is what we're doing having
Actually
an
moving.
impact on their behavior, their social emotional learning, their academic learning, or is it not having an impact? And if it's not having an impact, what do we need to do differently to have the impact that we want?
Okay, thank you.
thank you
Thank you.
for the opportunity.
Thank you, Nick and Doug. Appreciate it.
Good evening. Jen Sublett. The opportunity to hear about the SEED program and the progress that it has made provides a natural time to also spotlight some of the professional development strategies that we're trying in supporting the SEED team. So, as you know, we are working to develop a robust professional learning program with lots of different avenues and vehicles for teachers to deepen their learning and to better their practice. Micro-credentialing is actually a national trend right now as a new vehicle for professional learning. It has some significant differences with some of our traditional offerings or ways in which we offer professional learning. And as you know, we have a micro-credentialing program with Dr. Hairston's shop in culturally responsive teaching. And the SEED program has also allowed for another opportunity of creating a micro-credentialing program as well. So it's allowing us to pilot a new approach, and as Mr. Colazar was saying, then study its impact. What we like about micro-credentialing is the fact that it is personalized based on skill competency, demonstrated changes in practice, and the impact that that change in practice has on students. So rather than a traditional, how long has a teacher been in a session, literally recertification points are sometimes tied to hours of listening to a presentation, we now are looking at what is a problem of practice, what is the professional learning, how will the teacher then design a way in which to change their practice, and how does that change impact their classroom and their students within it. So it's much more reflective, much more personalized, ongoing, and job embedded. Professional learning has always been challenging in that we want to know how the learning of our teachers impacts the learning and the experience of our students. And we're hopeful that the approach of micro-credentialing allows us to have a more clear line of sight between teacher learning and student performance. These are some of the characteristics that nationally we find micro-credentialing programs offer, and we'll be looking for different ways in which we're able to expand our own offerings here within Albemarle County. So the SEED micro-credentialing program, that is really hard to say fast when you're standing in front of people. The SEED micro-credentialing program is a pilot partnership within our 4 urban ring schools. We have 4 strands. I know, right? We have 4 strands of professional learning that mirror the areas of emphasis that the SEED team also supports within these schools. What this has allowed us to do is also create a strategic plan for these 4 schools, and I think you heard evidence of that not only from Nick, but also from Doug about the importance of a common language within a building. So Tier 1 SEED professional development, these are foundational sessions. It's that guaranteed curriculum for teachers within this building, these buildings, designed to help support them given the context within which they work each day. These are face-to-face sessions, and there are guaranteed curriculum for teachers, just as we have a guaranteed curriculum for students. Within the SEED schools, we also have the Tier 2 opportunity where teachers may choose to become SEED credentialed educators. Here, we're moving into a hybrid environment, which for me is very exciting because there's just one of me. It is a micro-credential in each strand, plus a strand of their choice. So they have a scope across the themes, and they can delve in. And it's a combination of a partnership with Bloomboard, which is a digital platform, and face-to-face. So again, trying to be resourceful and trying to be able to scale up our offerings that both match teachers' ability to work asynchronously, but also our ability to provide more resources and opportunities for professional learning. So an example within one of these strands, this one is safe brain and trauma-sensitive education. So it's a theme within SEED. Not only can a teacher choose to delve into trauma-safe education, they can then pick from one of these 5 micro-credentials. So each of these is an option for learning. Our teachers have given us feedback that what they like about that is that within the context of a given year or within their context of where they are in their career, they can really hone in on what their interest is. So our first cohort of teachers from Magna Hurt who have completed a SEED micro-credential focus first on instituting a trauma-sensitive classroom. They work in the multi-age classroom environment, they're a PLC, and they really needed in the middle of the year, a reset and a refocus on making sure their space was trauma-sensitive. This is just a overview of all the different micro-credentials within each of the strands offered by Bloomboard. So again, we have face-to-face options. This summer, for example, I'll run Responsive Classroom, the advanced course, which teachers can take for 4 days over the course of the summer in a traditional face-to-face format. Or they can be working within the Bloomboard digital format and be working in a different learning environment. One of the elements we like about Bloomboard is that it models and mirrors our own PDSA format of reflection, where a problem of practice is analyzed, a teacher engages in research and learning, and then they develop a plan based on their professional context, implement that plan, and then evaluate it. They are developing a portfolio that showcases their work and the impact of what they do with students. Very similar, again, to how we would want students to demonstrate their own mastery and work. Bloomboard as a partner allows us to not only structure this type of reflective practice, they also provide the learning resources and feedback for our teachers. Because this is a pilot, I'm spending time interviewing and working with the teachers to find out what that first experience was like. Our feedback has been really interesting. They find it's very rigorous. The running joke from the Agner-Hurt teachers was they call them macro credentials because there's nothing micro about them. But they did appreciate that they were highly relevant. They chose to work with peers within their building, even though they could have done it individually. So I'll be looking for ways to formally and informally make sure that those collaborative environments are possible. We do find that we might need to norm what demonstration of mastery looks like. Our teachers tend to be go-getters, especially those who take advantage of pilots. And so they put a lot of work into completing the micro-credential, which is great, but it also meant it was a really time-consuming process for them. So I'll be working with Bloomboard to get a sense of the evidence that they're looking for and how our teachers sort of look in terms of what they've demonstrated now against teachers in other areas. They also want ongoing feedback. Currently, Bloomboard gives them feedback on their submission. I'll be working with our partner to make sure that we actually build in ongoing feedback so they can get a quick check as they're moving through the process rather than just at the end. And they also found that we're a pretty resource-rich division. And so while Bloomboard provided resources for them, they also called me and made sure I gave them some resources. And we want to make sure that our digital partner is one that's providing the value added. So I'll be working with that partner to make sure we really feel like they are providing the rich resources we expect. So just wanted to take a moment to showcase this. It is a new element for the professional development programming. It ties in nicely with SEED. We're partnering constantly to balance the micro-credentialing program that we have also in our Office of Community Engagement, and just trying to paint that whole picture for you all of how we're beginning to expand PD. Questions?
Jen, I thought we might mention that in Tier 2, there is a stipend associated with that.
Yes, the terminology that we're using is that if a teacher completes a micro-credential in each of the 4 areas, plus one of their choice, they are credentialed as a SEED educator, and there's a $500 stipend for 3 years for completing that.
So we heard about Agner-Hurt. How are the other urban ring schools doing in getting engagement of the teaching staff?
One of the parts of building out the program is the Tier 1 to Tier 2 element of it. And so by the end of this year, we'll have 3 of the 4 should be what we would consider done with Tier 1, and that then creates the foundation for Tier 2 micro-credentialing. So the launch will really be in the beginning of next year, adding on more seats. I think one of the interesting elements of creating a clear structure is the knowing sort of when to jump in. And I've had some teachers ask, well, what about could we get started this summer? And while they can get started on the research portion of it, it really is job embedded and context rich. And so they need to have their kids because it's designing a problem of practice with the current group that you're working with. So we, again, working on how to time that and match the timing of a micro-credential with the nature of the academic year.
And I asked Nick out when we were in the retirement party. I cornered him and asked him some questions about this, but now I'm totally forgetting what I was going to say. Good heavens. I I really did just lose it. I'm sorry.
I do it all the time, but it does allow me to remember a segue, so I can help. What Nick's team was really helpful for doing, even before I came on board, so they were working on this before we began our partnership, is vetting the digital partner and looking at the resources and looking to make sure they were quality and that this was something that matched. We don't want to create an asynchronous digital platform for teachers that is not as strong a quality as our own. We want to offer an offering that has the same level of rigor and research-based practices.
Oh, I know what my question was. It related to the instructional coaches or equity educators, and how do they, or can they fit into the mix?
For the SEED micro-credentialing, it's a wonderful partnership where an instructional coach is a great reflective partner. So as a teacher is looking at the research they've just done and internalizing that, and then thinking about their current class and what they want to try as an action research, that instructional coach provides feedback, ideas, brainstorming, and support in that way. The equity specialists as well are a wonderful resource for our teachers for resources, instructional ideas, the planning. I think one of the things that we want to make sure is that teachers understand they have a lot of options. Delving deep into CRT work, working through SEED micro-credentialing. Very briefly, I had a background in marketing. I want that clear message of what our different offerings are. I don't want to confuse the end user, which for me is the teacher. So making sure that they know they've got equity specialists to support them, instructional coaches to support them, even the LTIs, because in developing a digital portfolio, having that learning tech integration, what does it mean for technology and integration with our early learners are all important elements. So these partnerships are key.
Well, I guess my question was also in terms of the education of those resources about trauma and all the things that the SEED team is doing.
And that
it goes both ways.
It does go both ways. In other words, building the capacity of the people who are our resources within the division so they can help our teachers definitely. And that I think is also part of what Nick mentioned in one of the questions earlier about how does some of this PD then get out to the rest of the division. A lot of the work that the SEED schools have been able to enjoy begins to really inform, for example, the sessions we're running this summer, which are around social and emotional learning and CRT. And so we'll see a lot of opportunity for the rest of the division to tap into that as well. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And I would just add, as we think about micro-credentialing, one of the things that we hoped that micro-credentialing could do is help us with our division priorities. It's a way to think about putting something in place that you haven't had in place before and building these opportunities, these buckets, if you will, for teachers to develop in. So your next strategic plan will help us decide on what the next micro-credentialing bucket would be. And we're ready to move on to freshman seminar, if that pleases you. Okay. Jay?
Good evening, board members. Jay Thomas, Director of Secondary Education. Thank you for allowing us to come out and talk about the exciting journey of freshman seminar. You'll also be hearing from a couple people from the central office, and more importantly, we have 5 teachers with us who are teaching freshman seminar that will be sharing with us today as well. So being able to reflect on the successes and challenges of freshman seminar this year, you will hear about 3 areas this evening: survey results, curriculum revisions, and school highlights. Freshman seminar is a cornerstone experience for incoming students to high school. The primary goal of freshman seminar are to assist and advise students in developing their social and emotional skills, as well as setting academic and career goals. For the social and emotional aspect, freshman seminar focuses on 5 key areas: self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills. The main goals of freshman seminar are to support the transition to high school, foster a sense of community, feel and show empathy for others, help students find voice and agency in their learning, develop and maintain positive relationships, and promote an understanding of the interdependent relationship among social, emotional, and academic learning. The mission and goals of freshman seminar are worthy ones that need our continued attention and dedication year in and year out. Working with classroom teachers throughout the year, we have discussed lessons learned about what worked well and what needs more attention. You can see from our journey, the journey we have taken to get to this point. Beginning in 2018-19, Freshman Seminar became a required course for incoming ninth graders. In the first year, 51 teachers were Freshman Seminar teachers, and they will continue to transition through high school with their student groups that they had this year. Based on surveys, feedback, observations, and professional development, we have made adaptations and modifications that will be implemented in 2019-20. Now you will hear from our Freshman Seminar teachers from each of our 3 comprehensive high schools to share their experiences with you. First, you'll hear from Megan from Monticello, and followed by Western Albemarle High School, then Albemarle High School.
Thank you, Jay. My name is Megan Strite, and I have been the Freshman Seminar Coordinator at Monticello, and I am very excited to tell you about our experience in this inaugural year. But first, I would like for you to hear from our students themselves. So if you will bear with me just a moment.
To me, Freshman Seminar is a class where you can learn about important things in life that wouldn't be in a standard curriculum.
Freshman Seminar is a place to take a breath. It gives me time to be myself and learn how to deal with school and life in general. Freshman Seminar has also given me friends that I otherwise probably wouldn't have met.
It provides a safe place to talk about the many struggles of high school with people you feel comfortable with and relate to. Freshman Seminar helps students build relationships, maintain a steady mental health, and even advance academically by setting goals and planning ahead. Freshman Seminar is an effective way for students to enhance their growth in academic areas, as well as areas that academic classes fail to focus on.
I like coming to Freshman Seminar because it's so different from the other classes. It's refreshing. It's a happy place.
So based off of that, I hope you get just a little bit of a taste that Freshman Seminar has lifted off at Monticello. And we're not all the way there yet, but I think we've got takeoff. I do think that a good bit of our success this year has come from the strength of our start. Last summer, our incoming ninth grade families were greeted at orientation with a chance to meet most of our Freshman Seminar teachers and have dinner with them and their cohorts. For the students whose teachers couldn't be there because it was in the middle of summer, we did video introductions, and so they were able to see their teachers being silly on roller coaster rides and have that first face to look for on the first day of school. We've really gone after building a culture of fun among our Freshman Seminar teachers, whether that's just wearing our t-shirts together on Fridays, doing the same ridiculous songs out in the hallways during passing periods, but just creating for kids an understanding that, all right, Freshman Seminar is going to be different than my average academic classes. I charged our teachers at the beginning of the year when they had experienced so much rich PD and so many resources given to them that if they were to do 2 things well this year, I asked them to know their students well and to have fun with them. And I think that that has been the undercurrent of what has gotten us to May this far in Freshman Seminar. Another big focus and cornerstone of our program has been the service learning aspect, and you'll hear more about this, especially as we look to revamp for Freshman Seminar 2.0. But within our Freshman Seminar service learning focus, we gave students the opportunity to come up with something that mattered to them, a passion project. And whether they chose to go after that independently or collaboratively, they looked to identify needs that they saw in the world and then do something to come alongside another organization that was meeting those needs or look to address it in some other way. So throughout that, in addition to creating a whole lot of good in the world and many trips to the SPCA, students learned a lot of the soft skills of collaborating in a professional environment, of speaking to an adult that's outside of your family or outside of your school. And that interdependent relationship that goes from taking something academic, but then turning it into an event. And how do you make that happen? So the Freshman Seminar class really became an incredible place to house all of these skills. And because of that, we're really excited about the potential that that holds for students going forward as we look to focus more on the service learning component in Freminar. And so with that, it is my pleasure to introduce my friends over at Western Albemarle, Lynn Define and Phil Gehring.
Thank you so much. And before I tell you about the amazing things that my colleague Phil and I are doing over at Western Albemarle, I just want to take this opportunity to tell you how grateful I am to have been selected to be a freshman seminar coordinator. I worked with Megan from Monticello and Steve Turner from Albemarle and Jay and Maureen. And we met every other Tuesday for the good part of a year to try and make this the best program that we could for our students. And I think at the end of the year, despite the ups and downs and the roller coasters of it all, it was an amazing program for the teachers and for our students. Megan talked about the community service aspect, and I think that is one of the things our students so enjoyed about Freshman Seminar. We had students working at the SPCA, at the Nelson County Animal Rescue, but they also worked at the Senior Center and the Ronald McDonald House. We had students work on particular passion projects, whether it be with mental health or environmental issues or cultural issues. We had one student who got so into what he was doing with computers that he was asked to present at the Tom Tom Festival. And this is the kind of opportunities that Freshman Seminar gave. At Western, we also did a lot of field trips. Being out in Crozet, we were able to take our students to Perrone Robotics and Apex Clean Energy to see what kind of job opportunities they have after college. During finals exam week, we took them to K-Tech and Center 1 to see what their high school experience could be and how it could be different from the traditional one. So we also had internal field trips where we invited them to look at all the different electives that Western offers. And so that's just one of the ways that we gave voice and agencies to our students' learning that was different from the traditional experience. Yes, sir.
Phil Gehring, Western Albemarle. So one of the things I was able to do with my students this year is project-based learning, which I feel is very important because I was able to bring in UVA students, a mentor program, Rise for Real Change. They were able to work with students from UVA in order to complete 3 separate projects. The projects that we completed were new turf fields at WAS is one of the projects. That would be our sports students. Another one was stress and anxiety with 8th grade students coming to high school. It's something that we don't really think about. We think about the stress of 9, 10, 11, 12, but then the stress of coming to a high school that is so large and having a lot more freedom. And then the third thing that we worked on was students helping homeless, which actually won a scholarship from the Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy. And it was amazing to watch these students grow throughout the year. This was a year-long process, and to take ownership of something that they were able to create. And it just, as a teacher, it's amazing to watch the growth from an 8th grade student coming into high school to actually being a 9th grade student moving into 10th grade and having skills to move on to their core classes in order to participate in other ways. Thank you. And now from Monticello, or I'm sorry, from Albemarle is Katie and Michelle.
Hi, I'm Katie Christie from Albemarle. So in the same vein as the other high schools, Albemarle's had a lot of opportunities for community engagement. So we have had impactful guest speakers and opportunities for community building in our classes. As recently as this week, we had a group of freshman seminar students working to put some positive quotes in our bathrooms, painting some positive quotes in our bathrooms for just to improve the restrooms, but also to put positive, body positive quotes in those places. But at AHS, what we found most powerful was academic advisory and mentorship. So in that time, we would do academic progress monitoring. So that's looking at students' grades, helping them work through their grades, helping them keep track of their grades, working on those skills. But we also help students create a sense of advocacy. So when they are struggling in classes, how to reach out, how to get help, how to set up their Patriot Period, how to get the things they need to be successful at school. But I feel like one of the big pieces of that was the social emotional check-ins where we were asking kids, how are you? Do you have anything you need to share with us? And the things that we were able to get from students that way and how we were able to meet students' needs. Those activities lead to strong classroom community and strong bonds between our students and students in the class, but also students to their teacher. That community, those strong relationships, are one of the most powerful things we saw from Freshman Seminar.
Hi, I'm Michelle Benedict. I also teach at Albemarle High School, and Katie and I have the opportunity to collaborate. We are in one of the larger spaces, so we felt like we wanted to share a little bit about not only what Katie was talking about, but I thought I'd illustrate a few stories about what that really looked like in the classroom. So one of our students in our advisory was falling behind. She didn't know how to access PowerSchool, which is how you look at your grades and you find out what you're missing. And for her, she's a marginalized student. And for her, this was an aha moment where she finally understood, oh, this is where I can find information for the things that I'm missing. This is the place where I can find out what my grades are right now and what I need to hand in so I can stay on top of things. I spent a long time with her that day. And one of the things that was really interesting was that she felt empowered to reach out to her teachers and in hopes of making up that work that she was missing. And I gave her the option. I said, do you feel like this is something you can do, or do you need me to write the email? And she said, no, it's something I want to do. And I feel like that kind of empowerment is something that she just needed a little support in which to really make a big difference in her own learning. And I think that's one of the things that Freshman Seminar really can help with. There's a couple of things I'd like to share. After winter break, Katie and I thought it was important for us to check in with our kids and see, how do you guys think this is going? And they gave us some feedback, and we did a Google form because we wanted them to share and not feel like we would have any judgment against them or for them if we knew who they were. So I think they shared openly, and they said they needed more time. They needed more time in advisory, and so we adjusted our schedule to accommodate that. And likewise, when we talked to the other high schools, we shared this information. And one of the great things about this was that we were really able to work with the other high schools and share what was working and what wasn't working, and then come up with common solutions, and within our high schools, make things work a little better from that point till now. So I think that was everything. Thanks.
So you already heard from Nick and Jen about Plan, Do, Study, Act. We just shared with you the planning and doing, and we'd like to talk about the studying and acting. So the Freshman Seminar, 2 months into the initiative, the division, we surveyed Freshman Seminar teachers to collect feedback on implementation and identify areas for improvement. Then in the final quarter of the school year, we surveyed Freshman Seminar students to evaluate the opportunities provided by the courses to develop students' academic, interpersonal, and emotional skills. And you have full access to the results of those surveys. Just wanted to highlight some of those results for you. So in the staff survey that we conducted, again, they focused on the 6 goal areas that we spoke about earlier of Freshman Seminar. And just to highlight a few of the areas, and you heard it very clearly from our teachers that are teaching Freshman Seminar this year, that 75% of our students felt like that it was either really well received or mostly well received as far as fostering a sense of community. That survey for those questions was based off of 4 areas: not at all, somewhat, mostly, or very well. So those were the highest 2 mark areas, and that was 75%. In the same note, you see just over 55% felt the same way, that very well or mostly, that promoting an understanding for the interdependent relationship among social emotional learning, that we were meeting those goals of Freshman Seminar. This was the teachers. So what we did is we took the results from the teachers from from a couple months into the school year and their comments and thoughts of where they are. And we actually developed a professional development, professional learning opportunity for those teachers at the right around winter break. I think it was right before winter break for them to come and to be able to address some of those questions. And we adjust some lessons that we promised that we would do on as we went along. The staff survey also, there's three structures of freshman seminar. So we wanted to get feedback. And again, they had three choices that they could fill out here. Either it doesn't fit at all, it's a weak fit, or a strong fit. And those three areas are classroom meetings, academic advisory, and social emotional lessons. And again, some of that same feedback that you heard, it was very strong with the academic advisory piece, which you heard from some of our schools. The social emotional learning, again, a little bit more than half of the staff members felt like that was a very strong fit. And that's where we focused a lot of our professional development. The student surveys, what we just concluded recently, focused on the frequency of opportunities for them to be able to look at these different areas. Do they have the opportunity to do that? And those survey questions were based off of 4 different areas: never, rarely, sometimes, or regularly. So again, highlighting 2 of the areas here, and you have full access to all the results, but 78% of the students felt like regularly or sometimes the 2 highest marks that we developed a relationship with freshman seminar teachers. And again, I think you saw evidence of that and heard that as you went through, where you see 61% learning how to balance the academic, social, and emotional demands is tough. And I think that's very evident as we talked about student stress dilemma, and we presented last week at the school board about a lot of those challenges and initiatives we want to look at as well. So it kind of ties hand in hand. What we're going to finish up with is sharing some of the adjustments we've made and sharing some sample lessons for you. So I'm going to ask Maureen and Natalie to come up.
Good evening. Maureen Jensen, one of the lead coaches. This up a little bit. What we wanted to show you here was sort of a bird's eye view of the structure of the curriculum for freshman seminar. We spent a day last month with a group of curriculum revisers to think about freshman 2.0. And what you see here are what we call 5 modules for freshman seminar. Module 1 is discovery, and you can see the time frame when the discovery module is taught. We move on to connectivity, opportunity, and growth. And what you see there, that contribution model, that's the community service that you heard the schools talk about. And it sort of runs the course of the year so that freshman seminar teachers and students can determine when their contribution would best fit their time. I know Western likes to do that in the fall, and other schools might do it at a different time of year. So that's why you see that run along the bottom. And the modules, the 4 main instructional modules, contain about 12 to 20 lessons. And I wanted to include sort of this is a picture of the pacing guide for module 3. So you can see that it has 15 lessons, and it's broken down into 3 sections. This is the opportunities module. It's broken into sections called growing pains, growing gains, and growing together. And these were written by teachers in our division, these lessons.
Natalie Farrell, also a lead coach. I'm just going to walk you through a little bit of the template for the lesson design that our teachers use. This template has been modified and refined throughout the year based on feedback so that it can meet the needs of all the teachers across all of the schools in the best way that we can. So you'll see at the top, every lesson is designed around a big idea and essential questions that guide the lesson and the content. And then there are also structures, strategies, and routines built into the lesson so that students and teachers both have a sense of what they're getting into every day when they come to the class. So classes generally start with a bell ringer, which is just a warm-up to get kids started and thinking about what they're going to be discussing, learning, or doing in class that day. And then we move into a launch, which is more of a something that will activate student thinking around the topic. And then you'll see in the experiences is really the meat of the lesson, and there are things embedded in all these plans like links and videos and choices for teachers so that they can really craft the lesson to meet the needs of their learners. And then each lesson also comes with a wrap-up or a reflection that helps kids kind of synthesize or pull everything together and make connections so that they can transfer really their learning to other parts of their academic and real life. So I think everyone's going to come up and answer any questions if we have them.
So, Freminar or Freshy Sem?
Freminar.
Because I got to tell you, I like Freshy Sem.
I know there was some concern going into this school year from some parents. What kind of parent feedback have you gotten about how their children have developed during freshman seminar?
You need to go to the mic.
Sorry.
I think with anything, it's going to range across the board. Initially, I think parents were curious and they just wanted to know what is it. And as it got underway, the variety of different personalities at the helm of the classroom really gave each freshman seminar section its own flavor. And so some students had different experiences than others. And that is a point of discussion moving forward. How do we make sure that each teacher feels the freedom to personalize her classroom while at the same time making sure there's continuity? But the most encouraging thing that I can share personally is that I have had a number of parents voluntarily come up to me and say, if you ever need an advocate, if you ever need someone to speak to the value of this program, please put me on speed dial. And so I think that that is really powerful, to know that there are folks who are coming to us, seeking us out, saying, hey, this has benefited my kid, and let me tell you how. So.
I want to say from my perspective, I actually had the opportunity to substitute for Ms. Define back before spring break. And
This is a contrast in personalities leading the group.
How's it a contrast?
Oh.
So anyway, I did go. What I want to say is that I was really bowled over by the student-run aspect of the program that you've created, and I assume that probably the majority of teachers have created in this program. That when the class started, they had already, because I was kind of running late trying to stay organized. They had already started working on the bell ringer. Students helped me get connected and all the things that we needed to do. They were expectant that things were going to happen in the class. They shared things that I couldn't imagine. We talked about, one of the things we talked about was to tell a story of where we failed at something and then learned something new from it, and everything got better. Things were better than they were before. And the stories were really sharing, the students were sharing stories that I just don't think we would have been hearing, before this program as freshmen in high school, because of their concern for not being, for being left out of a group or not being accepted. It was very clear to me that you, over the course of the year, had really established a sense of community in that classroom. So I was very impressed, and I know it was just one snapshot for me, but it could have been different, right? But it was great. It was really great.
I think one of the big problems with freshman seminar was that when the guidance counselors from the middle schools were telling about what freshman seminar was, they didn't know exactly what it was going to be. Mm-hmm. So no one knew what it was coming in. So we made a great effort this year to get the parents the information to know what freshman seminar was. And so hopefully that information, and the other thing that's one of the ways the parents, they just didn't know what it was. And the second thing is students said, we want more study time. We want more academic advisory. And we heard that. And we are building in next year the program to make that better. So while no system is perfect, we're listening and we're trying to make it better. So.
About what's the average size class for the seminar, and how often does it meet?
So the freshman seminar meets as one of the 8 classes of the students. So just like any of your other classes, they take around 90 minutes every other day, and the ratio is around 1 to 15 is what we want it staffed at.
I was looking at the survey data. It sounded, to me, it appeared, especially the student survey, it seemed okay, but not great.
Yeah.
I mean, I would hope, that, of course, we have nothing to compare it to.
Sure.
But hopefully, as you continue and get that feedback, it'll become a much more effective program. And you talked about parents not knowing what freshman seminar was. I think looking at the survey data from students, I don't think they knew what they were supposed to be learning. And so maybe making sure that you up front say, these are the things that we're going to learn, these are the things that you're going to be able to take away from this seminar might really help.
Thank you, Steve.
Also, as I was looking at the data from the student survey, I wondered, did you see a variance between high schools? Did you see
So for the student survey, we didn't ask for the kids to identify themselves by high school.
Okay.
And for the staff, we did, but for the students, we didn't. So
okay, and I just,
can't
you
break
know,
it down that way.
and I think that might be a great feedback tool if you got feedback from not only which school, but which teacher. So it might flag that some teachers were really successful and some teachers were less successful, and what we could do better in staff development, or, maybe this freshman seminar is not for every teacher.
I hope it would be.
I just want to thank you guys for doing this, because I think this takes a lot of courage to do something like, this is brand new. This is something that it would have been very easy for you guys not to do it, right? It would have been the easy thing. And I appreciate everything you've put into it. I want to speak from my child's perspective. My child griped about freshman seminar the whole time and then told me how awesome it was every single day. It's sort of like, and I said, Kendra, is it kind of cool to like freshman seminar? She's like, no, you're not supposed to like it. I said, but do you like it? She's, well, yeah. And so I think that when I look at the student surveys, I kind of wonder if there's not something that built into it. It's sort of like, well, I don't like freshman seminar either. Because when I was getting down to the nitty gritty, Kendra told me, well, we did this and we did this and we did this. And I said, well, those good things. Oh, yeah, I'm glad we did that. I'm like, so maybe it was a good experience. So I just want to thank you. I think we can always do better, but I'm so glad that we did something. And I thank you very much.
I would second the positiveness. I think it's really good. And one of the things I think, in some ways, we won't know the effectiveness of this program until these students are juniors and seniors. And it would be, I think, wonderful to survey them then and say, what did you think about freshman seminar?
Yeah, I think the program is good too. But how many minority teachers do we have as seminar teachers? Are there any?
I don't know that we've broken that out, Graham. I don't know. I can get that for you and break that out with it. Each school, the principals, as they build their master schedule, decide who's teaching it. So what they're doing right now is finalizing who's teaching it next year. So the people that are doing freshman seminar, as they step in and do the sophomore seminar and follow the kids along, a new batch of teachers come in. So I can get that data for you, but I don't think we broke it out. Like I know we didn't.
Okay. All right.
So we can get that for you if it's something you want.
All right, thanks. Yeah.
So you said when they're juniors and seniors, I don't know if you realize that the students I have now, I will still be their teacher when they're seniors.
Yes.
So the idea is that I get to stay with them. So that's really exciting for me too, that I will be able to watch these kids grow and have that relationship with them until they graduate.
I always thought that concept of staying with those students for 4 years was one of the great strengths of this program. And so that's one of those reasons why I think it would be good to get feedback as these students maybe start their senior year and they're reflecting back.
But there's also going to be a lot more crying at graduation.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to
Thank you so
thank
much.
all our
much.
educators for
Yeah.
tonight's presentations. Thank
Thanks
you
for
so
staying.
much.
Yep. Great work, guys.
I think Pat's up. Dr. McLaughlin.
Good evening, board members. I'm Pat McLaughlin, Chief of Strategic Planning. And as Dr. Haas alluded to earlier in the evening, May is a very busy month for SOL testing. Our spring non-writing testing began May 6th, and with the exception of retakes, is due to wrap up by the end of next week. Since we began on May 6th, students have completed 22,139 assessments. The fact that our assessment process is completed so smoothly is a testament to the team effort put in by India Han, our Division Director of Testing, Chris Gilman from the Office of Strategic Planning and Accountability, our school support teams in LEAD, and particularly our individual school testing coordinators who put in tremendous amounts of time and effort into this work this time of year. As you know, SOL tests are a key component in the state accreditation process, and I'm here tonight to give you a brief update on how schools are assigned accreditation ratings by the State Department of Ed. Official results from the Department of Education will come to us later in the summer or early fall, and we'll update the board on our school-specific accreditation status at this time. So as you know, the Board of Education has implemented a revised accreditation set of accreditation standards this year. The new standards are designed to encourage continuous improvement and place increased emphasis on closing achievement gaps. Prior to this year, state accreditation was measured only on overall student achievement on state SOL tests. The revised accreditation standards measure performance on multiple school quality indicators and now have provisions to credit schools and students for growth from one year to the next. All schools are evaluated on the indicators seen here. These include overall proficiency and growth in English, reading, writing overall proficiency and growth in math, proficiency and growth for achievement gap groups in English, and proficiency and growth in achievement gap groups in math, overall proficiency in science, and chronic absenteeism. Schools are assigned a performance level for each category, with level 1 indicating performance at or above the standard, level 2 indicating a score that is near the standard, and level 3 indicating below standard. You can see for the most part, the standards for our academics are 70% or higher, with the exception of English, which has a threshold of 75% to achieve level 1 status. Chronic absenteeism, which is defined as missing 10% or more of the school year, sets a threshold of fewer than 15% of the students to achieve level 1 status.
What's 20%? Or what's 15%?
I'm sorry?
What would be 20% of the number of days?
It's 10% of the number of days.
Right. What is that? How many
18.
days?
So we have 180 school days. It's a little bit more complicated than that because you have to be enrolled more than half of the school year, and it's depending on how many days you're enrolled. So if I only enrolled 95 days in the school year and I hit 9 absences, I would be on the threshold of chronic absenteeism, if that makes sense.
Thanks.
So in addition to the indicators in the previous slide, high schools have 3 quality indicators on which they're also evaluated. The first is called the Graduation and Completion Index. Each school is assigned a score for the index that is calculated using differing weights for students who earn diplomas, who earn GEDs, who get certificates of completion, or who are still enrolled in school after their 4th year but have yet to graduate. That's put into a formula to give the graduation and completion index, and to get a level 1 status in there, you have to have a score of 88 or higher, as you can see there. The second indicator is the dropout rate for the cohort, meaning they make a very simple calculation. What are the number of students who dropped out in comparison to the number who entered as a cohort of 9th graders 4 years previously? They divide those two numbers, and that gives you your dropout rate. 6% or less is a level 1 indicator for us. And then the final indicator is another new one, and that's called the College Career and Civic Readiness Index. This one actually won't go into effect until the 2021-2022 accreditation status, but the state has identified 4 indicators for college career or civic readiness. Those are completion of an AP, IB, or dual enrollment class, earning a CTE credential, completing a work-based learning experience, or completing a service learning experience. So to calculate this, every student who has done at least one of those, you don't have to do more, at least one of those is counted in the numerator, and then it's divided by the total cohort number. And again, as you can see, level 1 for that is 85% or higher. So these indicators are combined to determine a school's accreditation status with the State Department of Ed. There are 3 accreditation ratings that schools can earn. The first is accredited, which means all of the quality indicators that you just saw are at level 1 or at level 2. You can have as many level 1s, as many level 2s as you want. As long as you have everything in the green or the yellow, you earn accredited status. Accredited with conditions mean a school has 1 or more indicators at a level 3. Schools who are accredited with conditions must submit a comprehensive needs assessment and a continuous school improvement to the State Department of Education. And the final category for accreditation is accreditation denied. Schools are rated as accreditation denied if they've been accredited with conditions and they fail to adopt or fully implement the required corrective actions to address the level 3 conditions within their school. So it's important to note that for schools that have consistently demonstrated success for state accreditation, the Department of Education grants accreditation waivers. These waivers allow schools to maintain their designation of accredited during the entire 3-year waiver period, even if one or more of the indicators falls to a level 3. To be eligible for a waiver, schools must meet full accreditation criteria for the 3-year period being used to determine waiver eligibility. So that brings us to our current state for accreditation. All of our schools are designated as accredited with the exception of Greer Elementary this year. Greer is accredited with conditions for level 3 scores in achievement gap for students in English and for students in math. Greer successfully completed their comprehensive needs assessment and continuous improvement plan and submitted both of those to the state, and they were both accepted. The majority of our schools have been granted waivers through the 2020-2021 school year. But there are 8 schools in the division which are not eligible for waivers beginning next year. So if any of these schools have an indicator that is at level 3, they'll be designated accredited with conditions during the 2019-2020 school year. All other schools are on waivers through 2020-2021. So in essence, if any schools are going to not be accredited, fully accredited, these are the possibilities there. Finally, there are future waivers that the state is creating. There's going to be another waiver period that runs from 2021 through 2024. We're not quite clear on which years are going to be counted for those yet, but there's potential. Any time a school, even if they're currently under a waiver, it gets an area that's in red, they can lose their eligibility for the next waiver period, which means that they've got to improve into level 1 or level 2 categories before that waiver period commences in order to keep their full accreditation. So as you can see, accreditation is getting pretty complicated. Our goal is always to have 100% of our schools fully accredited, and we work toward that every day. And so that was just a brief overview of kind of our current state of where we are. And if you have any questions about any of those, I'd be happy to answer them.
I have a question.
Questions?
Guess I haven't used my voice for a while. What are the 4 criteria that would make you eligible for the waiver? Why aren't our schools?
So if in any of the this waiver period that we're in right now had looked at 3 previous years of accreditation data. And if schools had any items under the old accreditation standards, it's a little bit complicated. Some of the waivers look at old accreditation standards, some of the waivers look at new accreditation standards. Mm-hmm. And if any of those had been at a level 3 during the past 3 years, they're not eligible for the waiver.
So basically like a warning school, if they're...
That's right.
Close to the line, they're not allowed to get a waiver?
Yes. So if you, the waivers are granted so that schools who have been consistently high achieving, if they have a slip, they don't automatically drop out of their accredited status. Okay. If schools have had some accreditation issues, then they are not eligible for that waiver because they should already be focusing on those areas and trying to pull them up into the yellow or the green, if that makes sense. But it's the waiver process has become much more complex with this new system, and we're hoping the state continues to refine its guidance that it gives to us to make it a little bit easier to understand which schools are accredited and which years are going to count toward those waivers.
Do you like the changes?
I think the changes have a lot of positives to them because there's a lot of student growth factors that come in. You know, for example, when you look at those scores to hit that 75% threshold, that's not only students who hit a 400 and pass their SOL test, but the state's created tiers of growth. So if I was a third grader and I did really poorly on my reading SOL as a third grade student and might need 100 plus points to get to passing as a fourth grader, the state said, well, you know, it's kind of unlikely a student's going to make that big of a jump. But if we get to a tier 2 on that, we're going to count that as growth. The student doesn't pass the SOL; it doesn't count as a passed SOL for him. But the state says that's making the progress we want to see. That student's on track to eventually be passing his SOLs, and so that I think that's a positive. That we've asked the state for quite some time to find a way to incorporate student growth into SOL scores. I do think it also puts a clear focus on our achievement gap groups. Our previous accreditation was only for overall students. You looked at how did all of your kids do on their reading test, and so sometimes that could mask some issues with some of our membership groups for achievement gap. Now, if I think there's 6 or 7 different membership groups for the achievement gap, and if any 2 of those fall into level 3, then the whole category becomes level 3. And so it puts a pretty clear focus on that.
I think just the difficult part is trying to figure out all the different nuances to the rules as they bring it on.
That's right.
And you've done an excellent job of interpreting all that, Patrick. I'm not surprised, but I mean it's pretty astounding how quickly you're able to explain all that with the implementation occurring when it did. The other thing that Dr. McLaughlin's working on in his office is working to align our internal school improvement, our school strategic planning process with the states, because the forecast is that at some point the state will have a template that all schools use. So we're trying to move in that direction, and we're trying to strike a balance between making sure that we continue to do the good things, the concept-based learning, all the project-based learning, all the things that students enjoy, and make sure also that we incorporate competencies to be sure that the teachers are mapping the engaging work that they do to competencies and also assessing based on those competencies so that we have a better picture of how students are doing along the way. I think my read on it from most superintendents is pretty much what I said, that they're pleased to see growth accounted for in a logical way. At one time, the state was getting ready to roll out percentile growth scores that looked like a baby's growth chart, and that just didn't get anywhere. This is much more easy to understand and far more encouraging for teachers, because it gives the teachers a feeling that they can make progress with the student and have a sense of progress and accomplishment along the way. So it's a move in the right direction, and our goal, as Pat said, is to have all of our schools accredited. And I'd also like to see schools beating those odds and getting more VIP awards, which is the next tier where your school gets recognized for achievement. We have a few schools that get those from the state, but I'd like to see more of them.
I guess my question is not about it's about Greer. I mean, we're now having a second new principal in 2 years. It is our highest poverty school. It's in my district. And how are we going to get it there?
I think that's a question we're all putting some serious thought into. We don't know this year's results yet for Greer, so those will come to us in the late summer, early fall. Mm-hmm. I know Jill Lee did some had that as her focus there. I'm confident that Steve Saunders is going to be a great leader at the school too, and that we can put a collective team effort behind what we can do.
How does the state accreditation data deal with the high mobility students? My data is a couple years older. I know last I spoke with Robin, so it is that's a couple years old, out of 650 kids, she had something like 96 kids come in substantially after the first of the year or leave before the end of the year.
There
What does
are
that
some
do to your
provisions. There's
Yeah.
some provisions for when a student enters your school.
Yeah.
There's a couple of different thresholds. One for federal accountability, one for state accountability. I don't want to say without mixing them up because I don't have it right in front of me. But if a student enters after a certain date to your school, their score does not count towards your state accountability. So there are some provisions for that. Same thing if a student leaves you, obviously he doesn't count for that school anymore and may count for the school to which he or she moves.
So what I would say is that in response to that question is the way I would answer is you're going to get there through high quality teaching and learning. And that sounds trite or very global. However, I would say that when you open up the budget notebook and you look at the 20 proposals that we've made, all of those are tied back to metrics that will enhance learning for students. The culturally responsive teaching program is an evidence-based practice. As teachers are credentialed in that, they will grow. Greer is a very low, is completely out of balance in terms of the diversity of the teachers that work there and the diversity of the students. As we make more diversity hires at Greer, that's going to have an impact. When we improve the quality of our substitutes, because it is a high-stress school, and teachers tend to be off a little more because they're getting professional development or they just need a break. That's going to have an impact. It's not going to be just one thing that gets it done.
Right.
It's
The seed team is
the seed team, all of it. All the things you're investing as a board are going to help play out at that school with focus. I think that's the thing we've been missing in a lot of circumstances around the school system is we've said, okay, we're going to have great teaching and learning, we're going to have this, we're going to have that. But the question is, for what? And my answer, starting as we started this school year, is to make sure that we have equitable outcomes for students. That if these students come to school ready to learn, they desire learning, no student gets up in the morning and says, I refuse to learn today. They're coming in, they're giving us their best. We need to use evidence-based practices to close those gaps. And that's how we're going to make a difference. And I know we will.
The other,
Thank you.
what I would add is that the fidelity to the professional learning community is really important. Yep. And when we see fidelity to that with best practices and lesson study and teachers working together around common assessments, we do see increases. So the fidelity to the PLC model really makes a difference.
I didn't mean it as a criticism at all.
No, you should ask that question every time we look at this information. That's the other part, is bringing it to you more often, more accurate, and being transparent with you as a board as to how we're actually doing as a school system on accreditation. This is the first time I can recall such a report to the board.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Dr. Haas, Dr. McLaughlin, I loved that because you told us specifically the schools.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the first time I've seen very complex things, but this was something that I understood and I thought was very helpful.
Yes, and this is going to be part of what we do. It is actually part of our policy that needs to be followed. And as someone once told me, negative news doesn't get better when you don't talk about it and don't share it. This is going to get better because we're talking about it.
Other questions? Okay, thank you.
I did have a question.
Okay.
I guess I was curious because, we're mentioning kind of some of these system-wide approaches that we're taking, like culturally responsive teaching, and I sat in on reading
micro-credentialing.
Grading the micro-credentialing final reports, and I got to talk to a lot of the teachers, and my understanding was that different schools are utilizing it completely differently. Like Kale is really embracing it, and we had this big bloom of teachers that took it there, whereas Greer was specifically mentioned as a school where not a lot of teachers were really participating. And I don't know what caused. I don't know if it comes down to the admin and whether they're supporting it. And I guess what are we doing to make sure?
Well, some of that is about the capacity of the seed group to Dee and Kale was early in.
Yeah.
And Leilani was there at Kale, embedded there. So that started very quick. And so some of it was about the capacity of how many people we had.
Which
to
I asked,
give that piece.
yeah,
So-
and which I asked them a lot about because, we want to expand this and they're already kind of at capacity. So I guess my question would just be if we have this school that's not, we're worried that it's not going to be accredited, what are we doing? Because, you gave this broad answer, we're doing CRT. What are we doing to make sure that that's happening at that school?
Yeah, so one thing for sure this summer, based on the anti-racism policy, is we said that all staff in the county were going to begin having that baseline CRT training. So that's a first step that we've never taken. So that'll be the first step for Greer. The other part is focusing in on their diversity hiring, and they've already made 2 minority hires, which is more than they've made probably in the last 5 years. This year they've done that, and our focus should be to look at the administrative team at the school.
That's
and
kind of
start
my
with them.
follow-up because
Yeah.
we just switched administrators, and I guess I'm curious. Like, did we ask? I mean, was that part of the selection process, or the person Steve Saunders? Is that who we're putting? Is he bought into CRT? Is he planning to use that? How does he feel about this?
Yeah, honestly, I think it comes in with him. And the other part is that Steve, if you look at Baker...
And this isn't my own thought.
Oh,
This
no,
was
no.
like the people involved with CRT telling me that it's basically dependent on the administrators of that school being bought in.
That's why, Dr. Harrison have had this conversation in the past. It has to start at the top. It really does. Because and there's a lot of things like that that you're pointing out. In schools, the principal role is an important role. If there's a division initiative, they need to buy into it with us for good reason. And one of the things that we've already talked to Steve about is the fact that the CRT program's not strong at Greer. And yeah, that's just part of him coming on board and taking it on. So it should start at the top. The other part is that if you look at Steve's track record at Baker Butler, he's pretty much closed achievement gaps for African American students at that school that were deep and wide. So he knows how to do it. He has high fidelity to the professional learning community model. But I think that the X factor in a lot of these pieces is the practice of CRT, and it is the diversity of the staff. I think those, people will say, well, why do they'll ask me, like, why does it matter if you have diverse teachers? And the reality is that it is an evidence-based practice that when students of color have teachers of color, they perform better in class. When white students have teachers of color, often they perform better in class. By having a diverse mix of teachers at the table, they see all people working together collaboratively, and they collaborate better. So there's a lot of evidence around this. It's not just a feel-good thing. I'm preaching to the choir, but there's evidence and reasons for why we're doing this. Greer does not have a diverse teaching staff, period. It's far out of balance. I believe that as we increase the diversity of that teaching staff, that school is going to perform better. I also believe that we can build the capacity of the staff around culturally responsive teaching practices, the school will perform better. And that does start with the principal.
Yeah, I guess that's just all I'm saying is that I know that we have these broad things, which I agree, evidence-based practice. I want to make sure that we have a focus that they're actually being implemented in that school because different schools based on the administrators are, having different results.
And those are elements that would be in the continuous school improvement plan as well. So we should see them
and we used to be
reflected
pretty wide open on those plans about, what do you want to do with your school improvement? But
Now is it going to be like targeted?
Yeah.
The state process requires that.
For Greer, they don't get. It's like you have 2 choices that are state choices.
Yeah.
So you lose that autonomy. I don't know if that's one of the best things ever, but you do.
I would just like to affirm that school-based leadership does matter, especially from that principalship perspective. I mentioned the diversity conference that's upcoming, and when I look at those who have registered, we don't have the participation from our principals that we should. The principals who have registered for the conference are those who are already participating in the program. such as Dee Dee Jones from Kale, Michael Ronnie, who will be certified this year as a principal, Ben Allen from Kale. I'm not quite sure why our principals have not engaged in one of the best experiences that they could have relative to being introduced to culturally responsive teaching, but it hasn't happened.
Maybe you could call them tomorrow and ask them.
I went through the list and I was thinking about sending something out directly to them, especially where they have people who have gone through either the micro-credentialing process or the certification process. But we pushed it out there. You know, some of this has got to come from the heart because you know that's what you need to do. And when we talk about mandating, you can't mandate a commitment. You have to understand the difference that it can make. But I'll follow through with that. But
it's called, what Dr. Kastner used to call it, and what I call it is called directive empowerment. You know what that is, Dr. Hairston. Matter of fact, we'll help you. You can pick up the phone, and the rest of us, it's good to know that information. I'm glad you're sharing it tonight. Might have been better to, clue me in ahead of time, but we should pick up the phone tomorrow and make those phone calls and have those principals registered. Unless they're attending a wedding or something.
You're a good man, Dr. Haas.
Thank you.
Is that conference going to be the same as last year, where you get to sit in the different classes?
We have 23 folks who've gone through the certification process. 21 will be presenting, and they will be showing the evidence base that Dr. Haas has talked about as to how they have gotten specific results with students based on some intentional acts of teaching. Also, we'll have a gallery walk of the micro-credentialing individuals. We've had 27 folks to go through the micro-credentialing this year. We're still determining those who have met the criteria.
Okay, that sounds, so it will almost be the same format that you've used in the past, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And when the invitation is extended, could Greer especially be included in that list? The calls that you're going to make? That somebody's going to make?
Absolutely.
I mean, come back and tell us which principals attended.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. They should, I guess, get recognition for it. I mean, it's kind of, that's my fear with CRT is we're going to be preaching to the choir eventually, and as opposed to bringing in people that need to come in and be listening. And that's a great conference. I remember last year when I attended, I mean, you learn just from that one day. People should be there.
On top of everything else, it is high-quality professional development, and it's fun.
And it's something that we put money, time, talk, effort into. I want to make sure people are doing it.
Right. Is there any way that maybe the teachers at Greer could especially be invited to this?
Every educator in Albemarle County Public Schools has had the opportunity to be exposed to.
Right. But I mean maybe a special invitation.
Special invitation.
A special invitation, right, engraved.
Perhaps
engraved invitations.
Perhaps, Mr. Page, you may send that special invitation.
I'll think about that. All right.
You're really insistent on it. You got the email.
Okay. I'll expect central office help with that.
We'll get you. We got you.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I mean, it is nice to invite them, but administrators, I think there should be they should be coming.
Mm-hmm. Right. But the administrators being there without the teachers being there.
Yeah, but I think if you
Yeah,
find that the
right.
administrators,
Okay.
they're there,
Yeah,
the teachers
okay.
will go.
Also, we don't have any board members who have signed up yet either.
I just like to show up.
That's what I want.
Well,
Right.
that's what I'm wondering about many of the principals is they are. I haven't signed up yet, but I'm going to be there speaking
I'll
and
be
doing
there.
other stuff. So sometimes principals don't sign up for things and show up too. So I'm hoping that's what happened.
Okay. All right, thank you, Dr. McLaughlin.
Thank you. Thanks, Patrick.
We only have 2 other items on the agenda. So do we have a consensus to move ahead, or do you want to take a break?
We have one public comment. Can we push through?
Yes,
Okay.
let's push
All
through.
right. All right, so Mrs. Carlson will take charge of our public comment session.
I'm happy to. Dave, did you want to? Okay.
Nobody wants that.
Okay, got it. We invite public comment guidelines. We invite and actively seek the public's input in the matters relevant to school board governance and provide for time in our meetings to hear from our residents and community members. Respectful and on-topic comments are expected during public comment, please. Willful disruption of the meeting may result in being asked to leave by the chair. Public testimony guidelines are: 1, speakers should adhere to the following protocol. 2, at the speaker's podium, please state your name and address or voting district. 4, please give any written statements and other supporting materials to the clerk for distribution. Please note that written statements, there's only one person doing this, she knows the rules. That's why I'm reading so fast. Please note that written statements are made a part of the permanent records of the school board. Additionally, if the speaker is unable to complete the presentation in the time allotted, a copy of their supporting materials will be provided to school board members. 3 minutes will be allowed for each presenter to speak. A color-coded light system will be used to time presentations. The yellow light means that the speaker is 2 minutes into the presentation. The red light means the speaker is at the 3-minute limit of the presentation and must wrap up promptly. In order to maintain respect for all points of view, the school board requests no clapping, booing, or any form of support or non-support be used. If members of the public wish to show their support for a speaker, they may stand or raise their hands. Debate and dialogue with the school board is not allowed during public comment. We have Miss Amanda
there were two
Moxham.
people before me, no?
You know, they left. We have Amanda Moxham. Hi.
That's me. I'm Amanda Moxham. I'm in Rio District, and here we go. I actually wasn't going to make public comment tonight. I just came to listen to the reports, but some things stood out to me that I thought would be important for you to think about, particularly with your retreat coming up in a couple of weeks, and my hope is that some more actions around dismantling systemic racism in the schools will be discussed. So the reason that I'm up here right now is because I spent all afternoon with one of my clients here in town working on diversity and inclusion. And I just wanted to share this with you. So words really do matter. There's some words I've heard tonight get thrown around that I wanted to just share a little bit more around the impact of those words. Diversity, minority, micro-credentialing, and evidence-based practice. So it's often said that diversity and inclusion is somehow this bucket that's tied together. So people sort of say diversity thinking that it includes more than that, but it really doesn't. Diversity is just difference. That's all that it means. So when we're talking about diversity in organizations, what we're talking about is everyone is welcome here, right? That's what we say. We want everyone to come. Doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, we want you here. That's diversity. But the problem in organizations is that they don't focus on inclusion. Inclusion is the difference of saying that all are welcome here to saying this was created with you in mind. And I will tell you, I was really hopeful listening to some of the presentations tonight around some of the attention that's being put directly towards children. I really appreciate that. The challenge is that with a lot of those programs, I used to run a $32 million IT operation. And one of the things that I learned in doing that process was that when you spend a lot of time in a lot of small areas piloting a lot of different things, you end up not being very effective. And even if one of those solutions seems like a good hit, you can't make it sustainable because you don't have the resources to do so, particularly when other people don't want to let go of the other pilot programs that are going on. So one of the mantras that our team came up with that proved to be really successful was laser focus, not light bulb glow. So I wanted to share that with you. I think it's an important thing to think about. If you were to take all of the resources of the SEED programs and freshman seminar and all these different things and step back and actually look at the fact that what we're trying to combat is driven primarily by systemic things, systemic racism, classism, ableism, right? And those are the roots at all of this. So when you think about systemic racism, that's at the roots. Institutional racism is the trunk and the branches, the processes, procedures, and organizations that prop up those systems. And then you have the leaves. And what you all are dealing with right now is really just the leaves on the trees, and you're not getting at the root of the problem. So I had a lot more to say, but I don't want to get arrested. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Or Ms. Moxon. Does anyone else want to give public comment? Okay, we're done. Public comment is closed. I will go ahead and recap what Amanda said. She wants to give us some things to think about as we head to our retreat to help us as we continue to try to dismantle racism in our schools, school system. One thing was that words matter. Words she heard us say diversity, minorities, micro-credentialing. She pointed out the difference between diversity and inclusion. I feel like... No, it's good. It's good that other people... Diversity, inclusion, diversity saying all are welcome, inclusion saying we actually have created a space for you here. Created a space with you in mind. And then she pointed out after our presentation that piloting a lot of small things can quickly become unsustainable. And I like that she said it's important to be laser focused, not just have a light bulb glow. And we are getting at the leaves of problems without getting to the root of the problem.
Thank you so much for that summary, Mrs. Carlson. Do we have other business by board members or superintendent?
I just want to tell Jono, because I know that he's listening to this. Jono, we love you. We're very sorry, and you're in our thoughts.
If no other business, thank you to the board. Thank you to the public for being with us, and our meeting is adjourned.
You've earned your 35 extra bucks.
Huh?